Let's now switch over to your front-end workflow, and Laravel can help with that as well. Out of the box with the framework, you're going to see this webpack.mix.js file. So this is a wrapper around a JavaScript bundler called Webpack. Webpack is an incredibly powerful tool for bundling up your assets. But one small downside to that is it requires a decent amount of research to get up and running. That's where this tool called Mix comes into play. Think of it as a thin layer on top of Webpack to make the most common tasks really easy to accomplish. So in this case, if I want to write with ES 2018 code, I want to compile my JavaScript, I want to use Vue components, I want to minify it for production, all of that stuff, I can just say mix.js. And then I give it a path to my source file and a path to where the bundled version should go. And the same is true if I want Sass. Well, where's my source file and where's the output? Or maybe I like to use less instead. Okay, that's supported as well. Or maybe you like stylus. Or maybe you just want to do basic post CSS. So you really do have a lot of flexibility here. Let's bring it back to what you have by default. All right, so we have this mix file, but how do we use it? Well, next, take a look at this package.json file. So out of the box, here are some dependencies that Laravel recommends. So here you'll see that we have Laravel mix, and at the moment I have 2.0, but very likely if you're watching this video and you checked your package.json file, it'll say something like this. Now, as I record this, 4.0 isn't quite out just yet. So instead, I'm going to use the beta. But yeah, in your case, you're going to see 4.0, and that's entirely fine. So with these dependencies available, all I have to do is ensure that Node and NPM are installed. You can go to nodejs.org to set that up. It's a one-click installer. You'll see in my case, I have Node 8.11 and NPM 6.4. Anyways, I'm going to run npm install. And that's going to read all of my various dependencies and make them available to me. Now, while that's doing its thing, if we switch back to our mix file, you can see we have, let's bring that back. Resources is our entry point. Okay, so this is where you're going to store any non-bundled up assets. It can include images if you want. It can include your JavaScript or your Sass or your less or basic CSS. It will also include your blade views. So a number of things will go here. If we take a look at our JavaScript, we can see our entry point is app.js. Now, an understanding of ECMAScript 6 and beyond, and how Vue works with components, it's very much beyond the scope of this lesson. Now, if you'd like to learn more about that, bookmark vuecast.com, and that will take you to a dedicated series at Laracast, where I will show you every step of the process. But yeah, for this lesson, I kind of have to assume you know the basics. Anyways, we can see a couple of things. When we load this file, we have a bootstrap file that pulls in a few things. Again, these are just basic suggestions. You have complete control over everything. Okay, let's go back to app.js. Next, we pull in Vue, and we recommend Vue with Laravel, but you can use React, you can use vanilla JavaScript, whatever you want. You are in the driver's seat. And then we also provide an example component out of the box that might get you started. Okay. So because we're using modern JavaScript and ECMAScript features, we need to compile and transform and bundle it all up in a way that all browsers can understand. So that's where Webpack comes into play. What we are saying is, I want to use all of these new modern features, but yeah, do whatever you need to do to bundle it all up so that this code will run in any modern browser. So you'll see, ultimately, the compiled file will be placed within your public JS directory, and you'll get something like this. All right, so we can run our command using this npm run dev. And there we go, we're all set. So we now have a public CSS, app.css file, and then the app.js file. Now, you might be wondering, well, what is npm run dev? Well, npm run is a way to trigger, if we scroll down to our package.json file, we can trigger any of these npm scripts that we have here, and Laravel includes a bunch out of the box. Many of them are just aliases. So if I say npm run dev, that's just going to point to npm run development. Now you don't really need to know what this script does. Just for a quick bird's eye view, regardless of your environment or your OS, I do want to set node environment to development, and then we are going to trigger Webpack while providing progress. We don't want to see any module output, and I will specify the path to my webpack.config.js file here, and that's all we're doing. So you have a npm run development and an npm run production command. The difference between the two is production will optimize all of the bundled files for production. That means removing warnings. That means minifying your code. That means taking whatever steps is necessary to generate the optimal script and style sheet for your production server. So take a look. If I run npm run dev one more time, once that compiles, let's see, yeah, that's done. You'll see that we have our full CSS file and our full JavaScript file. However, if I run npm run production, it's going to do the same thing while triggering production mode. And again, most notably, that's going to minify all of your output to create the smallest possible size. Okay, so now we get the minified output here and here. So at this point, we can leverage any of this code. So for example, I'm going to go to my welcome.view and we're going to pull it in. Link, and we want to pull in app.css. And then if I scroll down to the bottom, we'll do this right before the closing body tag. JS, app.js. Okay, so if we view this in the browser, we have pulled in the necessary assets. So let me show you some basic workflow. If I once again go back to package.json, you know about dev, you know about production, but there's also one called watch, and you'll reach for this one constantly. Whenever you're working on your JavaScript or your CSS, go ahead and run npm run watch in the terminal, like I have here, and then leave it running in the background. This will now keep an eye on any changes you make to your JavaScript or your CSS, and when that file is changed, it will recompile it down to the public directory. So for example, let's make a change here. I'm just going to say body, background is red. Now you'll see, as soon as I save that, if I switch back to the terminal, I hope you saw that, very quickly it recompiled. So this means if I switch back to Chrome and refresh, oh, we're overriding that. Okay, let's get rid of the inline styles. Sorry about that. But anyways, if I go back to Chrome and give this a refresh, now that's taking effect. So if we need to make another tweak, green, color is white, that will all compile on the fly. Back to Chrome, and now we have a green background. And of course, the same is going to be true for your JavaScript. So take a look at this. In app.js, if you're somewhat familiar with Vue, we're registering an example component globally, and then we're creating a new Vue instance bound to the element with an ID of app. So let's go ahead and add that. ID is app. So this is sort of our way of saying Vue basically lives and can only live within here. Anywhere outside of it, it will not take effect, at least in this particular case. Okay, so if we have that example component, why don't we just throw it at the top? Again, if this is all new to you, go to vuecast.com. I highly recommend it. You're going to love it. Okay, back to Chrome, give it a refresh, and now you can see your example component. So once again, if we make changes to it, we'll say my updated component. If I save it, it recompiles, and we can view the updated output here. Now you can even pull in a Chrome extension called Vue DevTools. So if you search for that, you can install it through the Chrome Web Store. You can see I already have it. But if I switch back and open up my console with Shift-Command-C on the Mac, you'll see that you have a Vue tab here. So if we take a look at that, sure enough, we have our example component. And you'll see we can really review anything here. So for example, here, let's set some data, and we'll return name is Laracas. Okay, so if I save, that will recompile. And if I come back and refresh, now we can see that data here, which means I can reference it anywhere. For example, let's say right up here, I'll set the vtext, the inner text basically, to the value of name. And now if I switch back, that will say Laracas. But I can change that on the fly. So let's change it to updated. And you'll see in real time, this is reflected. An especially cool thing about Vue components is you could add style tags as well. So if you wanted scope styling here, let's say, looks like we have this little card thing. We'll say card, background is pink. We're going all out here. Anyways, that will now be available, as you see there. Or, this is a bit higher level, but yeah, we could scope it, which means even though we're using a general class name here, this styling will not be available anywhere outside of the component. And that's because it'll apply a unique class name. So if I refresh, notice if we select this card, Yes, it's using the class name of card, but it's also adding this unique hash that refers to the given component. So that's how we are scoping the styling. But yeah, there's so much to review here, and I can't expect to do it all in a single lesson. The important thing for you to know, though, is as part of your Laravel app, we do recommend you use Webpack, and if you enjoy that, Laravel Mix is a layer on top of that to help you with so many of the basic tasks you will need, whether it's JavaScript and Vue compilation, or React, or you like Sass, or Less, or Stylus, or you can even override the Webpack config object on your own if you need to. You can version your assets. You can extract all node module dependencies. So let me show you what this one looks like real quick, and then we'll call it a day. I'm going to rerun npm run dev, and you'll see this time we still have app.js, but now you have a vendor directory and a manifest. Okay, so when you extract assets, you will want to make sure that in your master file, you pull all three in. So you will want your manifest, your vendor assets, and then your main.app.js file. So if I switch back and reload, we're still going to get the same thing. So what, in fact, is the benefit to this approach? Well, when we said .extract, think of that as our way of saying extract all vendor dependencies. And when I say vendor, just think anything in the node modules directory, any library like Vue or Lodash or Moment.js. Any of those will be extracted to their own file. Now, as part of that, we still need a little bit of code to sync things up. So that's where this manifest file comes in. This is a Webpack specific thing. Just include it. You don't even really need to think about it. Now, again, the huge benefit to this approach is it allows for long-term caching. Before, when we had this code, well, imagine a scenario where somebody submits a support request and they say, hey, you have a typo. Instead of Laracas, you accidentally show Larcas. So you think, okay, I'm going to make that change and I will recompile everything down. All right. So as it turns out, just to make that one character change, you have to bust the cache on your production server, which means every visitor to your site has to re-download all of your JavaScript, all of your libraries, everything, all for the sake of a small typo. So what we can do instead is extract all of our vendor assets using mix.extract. And by doing so, when we go to our compiled file, take a look at this, you will see things like Vue here, or jQuery, or Lodash. All of those dependencies will be stored in this file alone, and we never need to bust the cache for this. If I make a change to example.component, the only thing that needs to be busted is app.js. You'll see if we scroll down, it's 326 lines. There is no library here, so busting the cache is fairly painless. Not a big deal compared to what we had before. So again, that's maybe a little bit higher level, but if you're optimizing for production builds, this is something to consider. And finally, you can even do things like, well, I want to version my assets. So this won't do file versioning, but it will do query string-based versioning. And again, this kind of goes hand in hand with caching on your server. So you'll see in your public directory, Mix generates this manifest.json file. This is all of our compiled files, and then we have a value here that will be the full versioned file. So if the file changes, this hash, of course, will change. So this gives you a painless way to update your assets and automatically bust the cache. Now I'll show you how to reference these values here, because of course you can't hard code this, because if you did, like for example here, if we scroll down, if you did this, well, every single time you make a small change to your JavaScript, you would have to update the hash, and you don't want to do that. So instead, Mix provides a helper function called Mix, and you can do things like this. If I would normally reference js/app.js, then we can do this, or even leave off the /. Now, behind the scenes, this Mix helper function is basically going to read this file. It will track down the key associated with what you referenced here, and it will return to you the corresponding value. So ultimately, you're going to get this long versioned file name without you having to manually change it. So let's do the same thing for our CSS. And you'll see I can just do this, just wrap it within the Mix helper function. Okay, so now if I come back to Chrome and give it a refresh, and oh, whoops, unable to locate Mix file. Did we remove that? Yes, we did. Let's go back. Oh yeah, we must have removed that. Let's bring it back. Resources, sass app.scss, and that's going to go to my CSS directory. Okay, so sorry about that. We're going to compile one more time. And now if I switch back to Chrome and give it a refresh, if I view the source, we'll see we've versioned the file using a query string approach here and here. So notice if I now make a change, let's go back to app.js, and let's change anything here. We'll just say data foo is bar. Now if I compile this down one more time, of course the file is different, which means the hash is going to be different. I'll prove it to you. Here, our JavaScript ends in 8AC7, but now that we've recompiled, it will end in 9330. So that means if I come back and give this a refresh, we are now referencing the newly hashed file path. And that means once you push it to production, your server is going to pick up, if you have it configured correctly, your server or something like Cloudflare will pick up, oh, this hash is different, so I will bust the cache and pull in the new file. All right, so I hope you're excited. A lot to review there. If what I've mentioned here feels a little overwhelming because it's not your main wheelhouse, no problem at all. But I would recommend these two series if you'd like to learn more. One, viewcast.com. This will teach you how to use Vue in a Laravel app from scratch, and it's incredibly in-depth, so it's going to take you a long ways. And in fact, you can just view as long as you want until you feel comfortable. Okay, next, if you want to learn more about Laravel Mix in depth, you can go to the series, Learn Laravel Mix. And once again, I have a bunch of stuff here to get you up and running. And then finally, if you decide later that you just want to use Webpack directly, we have a series for that as well. All right, so that should get you started with Laravel in the front end.